This is this idiotic hodl meme. People are criticizing this guy who bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin way back when and thinking, haha, what an idiot. In the event we were talking about a purchase of a Lamborghini, it was making sure that those who would purchase Lamborghinis could buy them for Bitcoin. We didn't care about buying our own. We wanted to change the economy. We wanted to create an entire new economy. Selling your own Bitcoin for old bloody central bank money, that is not why Bitcoin exists. It exists to replace the entire old system. Spending, in this case, is investing in growing the economy. You have to grow the pie, or what you're holding is just worthless bits of data.
So welcome guys, we are here in Berlin with Rick Falkvinge, and Rick, he's the founder of the Swedish Pirate Party. He's the self-proclaimed CEO of Bitcoin Cash, and he got into Bitcoin in 2011. You went in like at $3, I think?
Yeah, simplifying the story a bit, I went in and out a little bit, but the net effect is like I went in at $3.
And of course, like you wrote a blog article about it, and many people called you crazy.
Yeah.
And do the people call you still crazy today? Even like now, after like now the Bitcoin price, it crashed 50% from down to 20Ks to 10Ks almost.
Well, obviously less people call me crazy today, but people still do, and that's kind of funny. But you'll remember that in 2011, even the Bitcoin enthusiasts called me absolutely insane. Like the highest voted comment in Reddit's r/Bitcoin, and this is not a random person. This is the Bitcoin community's highest voted comment on my story of going all in 2011. Said that they cannot comprehend the depths of the stupidity my brain is apparently capable of. As in, that goes beyond calling somebody stupid or an idiot. And this was Bitcoin enthusiasts. But yeah, people are still saying that, shouldn't you sell? Shouldn't you go out? And these are the people who told me to sell at 10, at 50, at 100, at 500, at 1,000, and 5,000, and so on and so forth. And they're not getting the big picture. I've already exchanged my old money for new money. Why would I want to exchange my new money back for old money again? That's really the perspective you gotta have.
And like now, as the Bitcoin price crashed, did they say, okay, I told you so, there is no value behind it, it's gonna crash?
It crashed to 2, from 30 to 2, it crashed from 256 to 50, it crashed from about 1,200 to 200. This is just Bitcoin being Bitcoin. I mean, a crash of 50%, that's not a crash, that's a Wednesday.
Yeah. So, as I said, you're the self-proclaimed CEO of Bitcoin Cash. How can you be a CEO of a decentralized organization?
That's the point, right? Isn't it? I mean, if nobody is there to give you permission, then you can claim whatever you want. Yeah, let's go back a little bit here. In the typical old-style organization, in the old world organization, you were asking permission to do something. And you were gaining influence by getting somebody else's permission to do what you wanted. In the new style of organization, you get influence just by standing up and saying, I'm going to do this. And anybody who wants to follow me and join in this is free to do so. That's how you gain influence. You present a value proposition that people voluntarily choose to follow. It's anarchy in practice, if you like, voluntarism at a very minimum. And so, why could I not stand up and say I am the CEO? It's like Ayn Rand said, the question is not who's going to permit it. The question is who's going to stop it. And that's a key difference in perspective. Think what you will of Ayn Rand. It's still this, I am proclaiming that I am the CEO and saying that in Bitcoin Cash we have these community values. And it turns out that even though people took my proclaiming myself the CEO with just as much seriousness as I had hoped, that is, none at all whatsoever, they still read this paper with sort of as something coming from the CEO and actually laying out a pretty good groundwork for how you work as a community, which was exactly what I tried to accomplish, which was my way of reaching out and saying, hey guys, I think that this might be something we all benefit from if we follow, or at least try to follow. And people are choosing to follow it. People are choosing to work permissionlessly. People are choosing to follow the so-called Prime Directive, that the mission of Bitcoin Cash in particular, and cryptocurrency in general, is that we create liberty through profit motive. And I think just understanding that key sentence, if everybody just understood that key sentence, then writing that 11-page document was so worth it.
Can you maybe give us a brief history about Bitcoin Cash? Who's the person who came up with the idea? Like yesterday, you told on Sunday, on your birthday, actually, it was on Sunday, you told a pretty interesting story about it.
A completely random birthday. It was my 46th, but even so, there was this Maurice Shea guy who's also permissionless. Really gets this permissionlessness thing, as in doesn't ask anybody's permission, doesn't wait for anybody, doesn't wait for a threshold, just publishes, runs, and goes. As in this beautiful IETF credo, as in, I believe in running code. End of story. So this guy, Maurice Shea, started sometime March, I think, taking the Bitcoin Core code base, ripping out all the bullshit that was put into it that did not go in line with the white paper, like removing double spendability in terms of RBF, removing segregated witness, removing something else, I forget what, doesn't matter, and upping the block size limit to 8 megabytes. And just said that, hey guys, I have this client here. And overnight, the entire community rallied around it, and it became Bitcoin Cash. And that's what happens when you have a built-up demand for something and you just publish a solution. People rally to it. It just snowballs. And then, obviously, once SegWit 2x failed, once it turned out that SegWit 2x was not going to happen, then the path for scaling with a simple solution on-chain in the other Bitcoin chain was closed. So people who wanted this simpler solution just rallied around Bitcoin Cash instead. And now there are some 3, 4, 5 development teams on Bitcoin Cash. Everybody's just allowing each other to follow each other. So it really works permissionlessly instead of having this VIP process where you need approval and voting. And I hate voting. Voting is violence.
So how can the code can be changed? Like, for example, when 8 megabytes blocks will not last anymore, when they become too small, when they have the same problems like Bitcoin have right now, how they can change the code on a voluntary organization?
That's the first question, isn't it? As in, when you're increasing the block size limit to 8 megabytes, aren't you just kicking the can down the road? Yes, you are. But this is how you optimize the system. You solve one bottleneck at a time. There might be another bottleneck appearing when you're increasing the block size limit from 1 megabyte to 8 megabytes to 32 megabytes, and so on and so forth. But good engineering is keeping a system running. And in keeping a system running, you're investigating one step at a time where the next bottleneck lies. In particular, good engineering is not looking 5 years out and thinking that it doesn't matter, it's pointless to fix this near-term problem because we're going to run into the same kind of problem in 10 years again. You don't do that as a good engineer. You keep the system bloody running, which is exactly what Maurice Shea and now the entire Bitcoin Cash community did. So, doesn't it just kick the can down the road? Well, yes, it does. But this is a little bit like saying that 640 kilobytes ought to be good enough for anybody. This system does scale linearly. It does, which can be a problem. But it is not a problem when the underlying technology is scaling exponentially. Because that means the cost of your scaling linearly will be logarithmic. So you're good. And yeah, what happens when we need to move beyond 8 megabytes of block size limit? Not block size, but block size limit, the maximum. That's an important nuance here. Well, in March or May, I forget whether it's March or May, doesn't matter. This spring, there's already another soft upgrade planned to 32 megabytes. And this is not a hard fork required. This is just changing a configuration variable in most clients. Beyond that, you have weak blocks, you have graphene, you have thin blocks, you have at least 5 different very interesting technologies that help with scaling. Gigabyte-sized blocks have already been confirmed to work, and the testing is now with terabyte-sized blocks, which is far, far into the future. So currently, most engineering is focused on what bottlenecks appear when the blocks are 1 terabyte in size, and I mean that's not near term anymore.
But just to make it clear, like all the changes can happen in Bitcoin Cash and you need consensus, or how do you think, like when 8 megabyte isn't enough anymore, you just go with another coin, or how? Maybe you can clear it out.
Well, the development teams are talking to each other, right? And so everybody has freedom of initiative, everybody has freedom to follow. This is voluntarism at its core, this is anarchism at its core, this is the non-aggression principle. You have freedom of initiative, you have freedom to follow. Everybody has these 2 freedoms. And so there is already an initiative to raise this soft limit to 32 megabytes. And it looks like it's going to happen because people just see it as sensible, and so they follow the initiative. And it's really not more complex than that. Mostly because there is no interest in not doing this. Like, what's the harm? And people analyzed it. People looked at data. This is key. Looking at data is something that's been sorely missing from the other fork of Bitcoin. And drawing evidence-based conclusions from it.
Okay. So what do you think about the Lightning Network for Bitcoin?
I have many opinions on it. It's certainly interesting. I mean, everybody is going all wild about the Lightning Network now. But as a project manager, I get very cautious when people are promising the solution to every single one of the world's problems is just around the corner. Usually, when that is shipped, it turns out to be not the case. Sure, I mean, we're seeing some 100 nodes on the main network right now of the Blockstream fork of Bitcoin, if you can talk about that, since Blockstream is practically no longer operational, but still. And so these nodes are experimenting with it, and in that experimental phase, it looks really interesting as a technology. But I have a few observations. First, this is a really complex technology. And in technology, in general, simplicity wins. As in, if the simpler technology that gets the job done, the more resilient it is, the easier it is to deploy. We saw this with World Web from CERN. We saw this with email. We saw this with, well, even how TCP/IP beat out X25 and from the telco companies. This might be ancient history. I'm old, sorry, but even so, that's my first observation. Like, really interesting, but far more complex than just raising the block size limit. And second, and I might get a little flack for this, correction. A lot of people will bring out the napalm for this. For me, the topology looks very, very similar to a financial network version of IRC. Like, you have a bunch of highly connected nodes or IRC servers where individuals connect and open channels to each other, open channels to these highly connected nodes. From a topology standpoint, it looks very, very similar to an IRC network. And if that is true, and I haven't seen any indication it's not true, since both IRC and the Lightning Network depends on reactive security. Like, if somebody does something you don't want, then you can react and set it straight. Since both of these networks depend on reactive security, that tells me that the Lightning Network is going to suffer from all the network safety and security problems that IRC did and does. IRC was around in the early 90s. You still see channel takeovers and net splits. You can even force net splits in IRC. And we haven't seen this in Lightning, obviously, because it's so experimental a network. but I would be really surprised if they had solved something while it's still experimental, that the IRC community has not solved for 30 years.
Okay. So, but the market will solve the problem.
The market will solve the problem by picking the best solution. And this tends to be the simplest solution. If it's not, it could be simplest in many ways, of course. It's the least cost solution. But it's important to realize that least cost doesn't necessarily mean least monetary cost. It can also be the least cost of implementation, the least effort for getting running, the least risk of running it, the least lost opportunity cost for doing something else. I mean, there are many, many variables in how somebody evaluates their cost of choosing a different path. And what makes the market so efficient is that nobody else gets to second guess somebody's reasons for choosing a certain path. Because it's like, I don't like voting. Voting is exercising violence, but there's no right or wrong reason to choose a certain vote. Just like there's no right or wrong reason to choose a certain market alternative. And when you're looking at the old guard, when you're looking at mainstream media, they sometimes say that you can't vote this way because XYZ, you can't buy this product because XYZ, which is trying to impose onto me what's a valid and invalid reason for making purchasing decisions. And I really want to hammer that point home. There is no such thing as an invalid decision to go with a certain market alternative.
When I see the market, like I see people more speculate on a higher price. So how can become any cryptocurrency daily, like a coin where people pay with in the daily life?
This is going to come back and bite a lot of people hard. As in, I said early on that I've already exchanged my old money for new money. Why would I want to change my new money back for old money? There was this meme circulating early on in the Bitcoin sphere where there was a conversation between Morphevs and Neo, and I think we've all seen it, where Neo asks Morphevs, so you're saying that someday I can sell my Bitcoin for millions? And Morphevs responds, no, Neo. I'm saying that when Bitcoin is ready, you won't have to. And this has been lost, I feel. Like, in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, we didn't talk about Lamborghinis. In the event we were talking about a purchase of a Lamborghini, it was making sure that those who would purchase Lamborghinis could buy them for Bitcoin. We didn't care about buying our own. We wanted to change the economy. We wanted to create an entire new economy. Selling your own Bitcoin for old bloody central bank money, that is not why Bitcoin exists. It exists to replace the entire old system, not so you can change your new money back for old money. The difference here, and this is really key, the difference here is whether you're early on into a new system, in which case you're going to be heavily, heavily rewarded. Or if you think this is a get-rich-quick scheme, in which case it's going to bite you so hard in the ass that you deserve it.
But we see, like today, of course, there are many places where you can pay with cryptocurrencies, but the people, they still don't spend it, because like even people who are millionaires, they say, okay, I still got my income, like my boss, when they still got a job, they get euros or they get the dollars from their boss, and they say, okay, I better invest more, and I hold on to it.
Yeah, this is this idiotic hodl meme, right? That's the most moronic thing you can do. People are criticizing this guy who bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin way back when, and thinking, haha, what an idiot. Again, up until about 2014, 2015, the hodl meme did not exist. What we were talking about was spend and replace. Everybody understood that it is their responsibility to spend a small amount of their holdings every so often, or the economy won't grow. The goal was not getting rich quick. The goal was growing the economy. The goal was growing the economy to the point where you no longer needed to exchange it for fiat anywhere in the entire chain. And so you would have a complete Bitcoin economy that could gradually grow and take over the world. That is the goal. That has to be the goal. Otherwise, you're just stuck in a speculation bubble. And that's going to come back to bite you. So why are people holding? I don't know. Up until 2014, everybody understood, and I really want to hammer home that it was understanding, that spending a small amount of your holdings is not getting rid of money. It is investing in growing the economy so the remaining 99% of your holdings keep growing. Spending, in this case, is investing in growing the economy. You have to grow the pie, or what you're holding is just worthless bits of data.
How do you do it in everyday life? Like when you go to a bakery store, when to a restaurant, of course, they don't accept cryptocurrencies yet. And like now, like I have a Xapo card, it has been suspended. So how can I use it in everyday life when it's hardly impossible, when it's hardly possible?
Yeah, I'm writing. I have my own system for that. Like you said, I founded the Swedish Pirate Party. I wrote an admin system for the Pirate Party way back when, and this system is now getting adapted to become an enterprise-grade wallet for Bitcoin Cash. It was originally for Bitcoin Legacy, but Bitcoin Legacy was not usable for day-to-day use anymore. So I have an enterprise-grade wallet, which I'm using to make these day-to-day transactions where possible. And yes, I am using it in any way I can as money, paying suppliers in using Bitcoin Cash and so on. Not everybody accepts it. There's not always a payment path, but when there's not a payment path, then it's up to us who use this as money to make it more usable as money and create that path. That's how you grow the economy.
So now Merkel and Macron, they announced to crack down cryptocurrencies. Like, do you see a threat from the government side?
Yeah, good luck with that. That's like they were cracking down on this internet thing, or even worse, cracking down on encryption in the early 90s. They almost succeeded. It's worth remembering, cracking down on encryption in the early 90s, when we had pretty good privacy and a real war whether encryption should even be available for private individuals. But in the end, we won. The common people won against the politicians who didn't want strong encryption to be available for individuals. France long had a ban for private individuals to use encryption at all. It's important to remember. And this is completely unthinkable today, but this was just early 90s. So, governments cracking down on cryptocurrency. Yeah, good luck with that. What they can do, and what they are doing, is imposing financial regulations on the exchanges. Because if you're holding central bank money, you get to be regulated. Which is why, again, it is and was so important to create a complete Bitcoin or cryptocurrency economy that doesn't need to touch the exchanges, where your entire economic cycle is in crypto. Once it is, then how are you going to regulate math? As in, I spoke to legislators about this. How are you going to write the code of law to regulate cryptocurrency? I mean, in terms of coding, we talk about hard problems. Code is law. Law is code. How are you writing the words that regulate the mathematics we assign value to voluntarily? It is nigh impossible.
But I read, I think it was yesterday, I read in Bali it's forbidden to accept cryptocurrencies. So even when they see you accepting cryptocurrencies, like when you put up on your homepage, or when you have a restaurant, when you put on like Bitcoin accepted here or like Bitcoin Cash accepted here, they can put you in prison.
I can't speak for how the justice system in Bali works. Obviously, if you have an allocation that is less governed by rule of law and is more governed by the police can do whatever they feel like. I'm not saying Bali is one of those places, but it is not a place I spontaneously associate with what we call a justice system influenced by the Enlightenment. If you have a police force that can put anybody in jail for anything, then of course they can put you in jail for using Bitcoin. If they need to follow a law saying that where they actually need to list what's forbidden, then that law must explicitly outlaw cryptocurrency. And it's the wording of that law I don't see coming easy.
Okay. Two last questions. The first is, where do you see Bitcoin at the end of 2018?
At the end of 2018, wow. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting experiments this year. We're going to see a lot of interesting experiments with the Lightning Network. I think we're going to see the first problems with the Lightning Network. I think it's going to grow to show its first problems. I mean, even Lightning Labs are saying that don't use this on the mainnet yet. It's not ready for production use. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see taking off. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if it manages to cross from innovators to early adopters, and even more so into early mainstream. We're far from that point. That's not going to happen in 2018. On the Bitcoin Cash side, I think it's going to be really interesting to see the test with graphene thin blocks and going beyond 32 megabyte block sizes, which is going to happen sometime toward end of 2018, probably, either with new scaling technologies or with some sort of segmentation and reassembly mechanism. Apart from Bitcoin, it looks like you have a bit of a shakeout in the ICO space. I mean, when you went to any blockchain related conference in the last year, everybody had at least one ICO going, and sometimes two. I think you're going to see a little bit of, maybe with this particular dip, maybe with this particular correction, if you like, we get a little bit of shakeout in that. So people are starting to vet their ICOs more carefully. I'm not hoping for too much, but that's got to come at some point. In the longer run, I think you'll see a shakeout toward one Turing type crypto engine. You obviously have Ethereum as a prime contender for that. One general use cryptocurrency and one privacy focused cryptocurrency. I mean, the privacy focused cryptocurrencies of today are still somewhat struggling with various problems. You have Dash, where the master nodes are essentially big money launderers, which is going to be fun until the authorities discover that. Speaking of Macron and Merkel. You have Monero, where the average transaction fee is spiking, just like with Bitcoin Legacy. I saw a fee calculator for Monero being $4, but the average were even into the 2 digits now. And Zcash, which I think is really interesting, really promising. Not to mention Moxie Marlinspike's new initiative. I think that's going to be really interesting to follow.
Okay, like you haven't called a number for the end of 2018 when it comes to Bitcoin.
Seriously, I suck when it comes to predicting next week's price or next week's lottery numbers. My brain is just not wired the same way the short-term markets are.
You don't calculate in euros anymore?
Well, I calculate long-term potential, and I've done that. As in, I've gone on record saying that if you're looking at the markets where cryptocurrency, I said Bitcoin because that by then it was the only cryptocurrency that mattered. Now Bitcoin is down, or Bitcoin Legacy is down to market share of 33%. But cryptocurrency is a transactional currency. As such, it is one of many offerings on the transactional currency market. And so, based on these data, it can take between 1 and 10% market share on the transactional currency market. If you're counting in the velocity of Bitcoin into this, you're arriving at a conclusion that the value of one Bitcoin in order to serve this market need to be between $2 and $5 million roughly.
Okay.
But that's the end game. Like, that's when I'm calculating potential. Asking what's next week's price, that's like asking what's next week's weather.
You cannot predict it.
No.
Okay, my last question is, like, do you see any other coins or any other coin except of Bitcoin Cash, like with high potential? Like, do you have another coin which is your favorite coin?
Well, there is room for a more privacy-focused coin. There is. Bitcoin Cash is anonymous, Bitcoin Cash is amazing for general use. But Bitcoin took off with Silk Road. I mean, we can pretend it didn't, but it did. And there is a very, very strong marketplace for that kind of sound money. I mean, last year at Anarchapulco, we talked about money that you can use for more things is objectively better money than you can use for less things. And so anonymous cryptocurrency is objectively better money than central bank money if you can use it for contraband. That's looking at it in objective terms. The fact that it's illegal can be abstracted to the fact that the people with the most guns don't want you to use money for this kind of transaction. And if you can anyway, then the money is better than their money. So, is there some coin I'm particularly looking at? I think there's room for one privacy-focused coin to grow, whether it's Monero, Zcash, Dash, or Moxie Marlinspike's new initiative. There's something called Verge, which looks like it's taking off. I can't predict really, but there's a market for it.
Okay, thank you very much for the interview, Rick.
Thank you.